Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast Series. This episode is titled Wintertime Bottom Fishing, and we're going to be talking to Captain Byron Shults of Going Bogue Outdoors out of the Atlantic Beach area. We're going to be covering such topics as looking for bottom, productive bottom, boat positioning, available species, techniques, and then we're going to finish with a reminder of the importance of safety in the wintertime months. My name is Gary Hurley of Fisherman's Post, and Fisherman's Post has been serving the saltwater fishing community since 2003. We've been bringing you fishing reports, fishing information, fishing tournaments, fishing schools, and here in our latest and greatest effort, the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast Series. And it is in this series where we reach out to our captain and guide friends from up and down the North Carolina coast and ask them to share with us their thoughts, their insights on how to catch more fish more often. And in this endeavor, I am joined this week, just as I am every week, with my podcast partner, Billy Thorpe of Thorpe Creative. Billy, always good to be talking to you this week. No exception, of course.
Yeah, Gary, good to see you, man. Always a fun time on the Fish Post podcast, that's for sure. So really appreciate everybody joining us. I forgot to mention this in the last episode, but we actually crossed, at the time of recording that episode, had crossed over 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. Over 90,000 people have listened to our podcast on a podcast player across the world. And I think over 100,000 have actually viewed it on YouTube. So really cool, man. A lot of cool people in our community. So really appreciate everyone doing that. I just wanted to shout that out, Gary, because I forgot in the last episode. And making it all possible are our sponsors. So it's pretty cool to be partnered up with them, and to, Marine Warehouse in particular has really sponsored this podcast since episode number 5, and really making all this stuff happen and letting us, do all the fun stuff that we're doing in producing the show. So really appreciate them. I got a quick message from them, Gary, and I'll jump back and you can make up some bad jokes that somebody said from Marine Warehouse.
At Marine Warehouse, we have everything. We have new boats, we have parts, we have accessories, new trailers, we have a complete service department with highly trained technicians. Anything you need to get out on the water, we have it.
At Marine Warehouse Center, as we've grown over the last few years, now have a large section of marine supplies from start to finish for all your boating needs.
What I love about this region is to be able to get out on the water, and also we love to be able to get you out on the water.
The best part of working at Marine Warehouse is being able to get involved with the customers and share a love for the water.
Awesome. All right.
They're great dudes, man. I mean, had a relationship with them long before the podcast, but I'm with you, Billy, from early on. I mean, and as you know this, but as a reminder, they reached out to us and said, man, love what you're doing. We want to be a part of it. So it wasn't even them responding to a pitch. And that goes a long way, man. I hope we are helping Marine Warehouse Center, solidify their customer base, whether it's sales, service, or parts, man. They help out the Fisherman's Post boat. I hope you decide to let them help you guys out.
Yeah, and really the problem with the Fisherman's Post boat is it doesn't get used enough. I mean, that's the only really problem. So,
well, it gets used for family functions. It doesn't get used that often for fishing. I am pretty candid about that. I do most of my fishing with professionals because those professionals do way better than I do on the Fish Post boat. But the Fish Post boat definitely gets its time on the water, makes the family, well, wife and kids happy, and that's pretty important.
You make Marine Warehouse job easy. Hey, Gary, just turn the ignition, light it up a couple times. That's all you need to do. And joining our platinum sponsorship here with Marine Warehouse is Bland Landscaping Co. So I'll bring up their graphic here. So blandlandscaping.com/careers. They are obviously been around for a really long time, since 1976, and they're looking for some outdoors men and women to join their team and come be a part of what they're doing. And they're really prideful about, one, taking care of their employees. They got a ton of benefits on their website. You can go check it out. But then also getting people to work early and getting them home early so they can spend time with their friends, family, and obviously spend some more time in nature and on the water, which is one of our goals here at Fisherman's Post, to give you the tools to do that. And then another company that we came on that reached out to us as well is R.A. Hitch. Hitches, trailers, bike racks, and more. Chris and his team, very supportive of the podcast. So be sure to keep them in mind when you're looking to rig out your truck or trailers and whatever you need put roof racks on top of your car, all that fun stuff. Be sure to give them a call and make the trip up there, even if you're on the coast. Make the trip over. It's only a couple hours away. So,
Yeah, man, love our sponsors. When I was sitting there thinking, you're talking about land landscaping, like that is definitely in the realm of career and not job. I mean, I think that's what those guys are going to great lengths to do, is to make it a career, not just a job. And then, as we've said before, man, the professionalism of RA Hitch, I think it's just someone that you want to align with if you've got a reason, and they are the company. You know, I think you want a relationship with RA Hitch, quality people, quality guy, Chris.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Professionals, and obviously they sponsor the show, so they got to be making some really good decisions. Really good people out there. So
Right.
we appreciate them. If you want to sponsor the show, reach out to me. It's billy@fishermanspost.com, and I can get you some more information. And then keep us going with some coffee if you want to support Gary and I personally as creators. buymeacoffee.com/fishermanspost. We always will enjoy a cup of Joe on your behalf. So thank you so much, everyone, for the support.
Speaking of coffee, I was suspicious when Emmett of Marine Warehouse Center said, "Hey, man, you want to go grab a cup of coffee?"
Oh, boy.
I'm like, Emmett, what the hell are you doing talking to me about coffee? You never call me about coffee. Well, I just want to tell you a joke, man. I just want to be the joke guy. I don't want Terrell to be the joke guy. I want to be the joke guy. I was like, all right, we don't have to go get coffee. Give me your joke. I'll let you bully Terrell for at least a little bit. And this is what he came up with. Are you ready for Emmett's joke? Again, not Terrell's, not Gary's. This is Emmett's joke. Why is an octopus always ready for war?
I have no idea.
Because they're well armed.
All right, that's pretty good.
No,
you know what? I might just be an easy audience. I don't know. I like comedy.
You are.
All right.
You are an easy audience. That's what I got. But now, I didn't mean to interrupt the rhythm. Now, you know what I would love? I would love to see a fish photo.
I'm going to show it to you. Here's Warren Phillips of Wrightsville Beach with that says 5.3 pounds. For anybody watching, that does not say 53 pounds. The font looks a little weird. With a rock hind grouper that fell for a live pinfish. He was fishing 48 miles off of Wrightsville Beach. Good looking fish. I'm a little jealous. He's way out there. Looks like a ton of fun.
And you know what? He's in that short sleeve shirt, and that is not what Byron and I are getting ready to talk about. We're getting ready to talk about wintertime bottom fishing, which is challenging but rewarding. And Byron will tell us more about that. But short sleeve shirt on that big blue, warm looking watercolor, not this podcast. Not this podcast.
Yeah, it's just gearing people up for the spring and summer.
So what I want you to do, Billy, is as I'm talking with our guest Byron, I want you to pay attention, and coming back to you for Billy's best takeaway at the end of my chat with Byron Shults.
I'm excited, man. You guys have fun. We'll see you on the other side.
All right. So now it's my pleasure to welcome to the show Captain Byron Shults of Going Bogue Outdoors out of the Atlantic Beach area. Byron, thank you so much for spending some time with us here on the podcast. Pleasure to have you, man.
Hey, Gary. Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So I know that you're familiar with this, the tradition with Fisherman's Post. Before we talk about wintertime bottom fishing is 2 questions, the traditional 2 questions. As soon as you tell me you're ready to go, I'm going to give you question number 1.
Well, we're ready for it.
Question number 1, why should we listen to anything you have to say about bottom fishing? Why?
I guess the best stake for that question would be the fact that I've transitioned from being a bottom fisherman as a recreational angler to a charter fisherman successfully, and I've gone from being a charter captain to being a commercial fisherman successfully. So with each of those leaps becomes a progressively better fisherman that you have to be successful. For instance, now I'm getting paid for the amount of fish I catch versus before just getting paid for the experience of going fishing before just paying to go fish. I think that would stake the best claim as to why you should listen to what I have to share.
I think that's a very good answer. I mean, that might be one of the better answers we've had to that question. Question number 2, as tradition goes, is a non-fishing related question. Are you ready, sir, for question number 2?
Let's hear it.
All right. Bottom is another name for butt. So I have a butt question for you, Byron. How many times, on average, do people fart in a day? 24 hours?
Let me guess 7.
You would have to double that to 15, and that is male. The website said that is male or female. 15 times a day is the average that people fart. But I can tell you that my kids are on the high side of that. So if you know some people on the low side, my kids are bringing up the average.
I'm definitely well above average.
Well, let's talk bottom fishing. Let's talk wintertime bottom fishing. And again, you're out of the Atlantic Beach area. And what we have here, as is the gig with bottom fishing, you got to be in the right spot. So for wintertime, and I guess to even be more clear, we are talking about after the first of the year. So this isn't a grouper podcast. This is to help those bottom fishermen get through those months that are historically closed to grouper. So in those January, February, March months, what's the goal? How are you go about finding productive bottom?
So, we're going through a transition phase here. The 31st hit, shallow water species is closed for commercial. All grouper is closed recreationally and charter. And we're looking for opportunities to fish, to catch fish, given the weather windows that we have in January, February, all the way up till, I guess, March, mid-March. And traditionally what I'm looking for when I'm going out, against somebody that wants to go after the first of the year, they want to go bottom fish. It's a pretty day. You can lay slicks sometimes in January. I'm going to look for productive opportunities where I don't have to freeze them off on the way out. If it's going to be cold, I want to look for opportunities kind of closer to home. I might run 15, 18 miles, and I'm going to start looking at relatively well-known spots because, as we know, the nice thing about fishing during this period is the lack of fishing pressure. So if we cut all the fishing pressure off of traditionally very public numbers, very well-known places, all of a sudden we have very productive feeding and hungry fish that are just used to being fished for, used to feeding, used to have a variety of baits available to them to eat. And so that's going to be my first stop.
All right. So I guess what I'm wondering is again, we're talking out of Atlantic Beach. So what is some of the water temperatures that are standard? Everything fluctuates, but what are some of the standard water temperatures that you expect that time of year?
So I'm thinking January time frame, I'm looking 55, 58 degree water. The grouper, after the closure of the 31st, traditionally they spawn in about 56 degree water. And I was coming into that first of the year, I was fishing and looking for the grouper that would be kind of surface temperature around 66, 67, 68. So I might have been running a little bit further for that period of time, looking for my shallow water species that I'm going to be looking for now, just going for the sea bass and the other fish that are closer to home. Now, if I'm going to start running and looking for the beeliners and the triggerfish, which are another target species that I'm going for, I'm going to start running into a deeper water column, but also going to look at traditional places that they would be before the closure as well of the groupers, because that's a water column that I've probably already fished, but just not in the manner that I'd be fishing for now that the grouper is closed.
So, all right. So I'm going to try to keep up here, and I'm a little slow filming here in the evening time. So if we are deciding to go short, we're more in the range of 15-ish miles out in popular spots. And if we're going 15 miles out, then the most probable targets that we're going to hit on the bottom with grouper being closed are what?
It's going to be black sea bass. It's going to be your primary target with, I guess, if that's your target species, your bycatch will be knob porgies, and you're going to have a lot of, dogfish. That would be kind of your burden fish.
All right. And then if I want to go further out, if the weather window allows and I am hot for trigger and beeliners, then you're going to start at how far off in those winter months?
It fluctuates, Gary. I'd like to say that I'd prefer to run 25 or 30 miles, but odds are I'm going to probably run further than that to find what I'm looking for. And that's a plethora of hungry fish.
And so I'm going to ask you a question that you may not know the answer to, so I'm going to apologize in advance because I realize as I'm sitting here talking to you about miles out of, Beaufort Inlet, off of Atlantic Beach, and there's going to be people here listening to this that aren't necessarily fishing out of that inlet. So is this something that would translate as far as water depth? Like, so the water depth of black sea bass for you think would be the same whether you're fishing out of Ocean Isle or Wrightsville Beach, and the water depth for triggers and beeliners does bottom fishing work that way?
For the most part, yeah. I'd consider consistent water columns and temperature breaks being consistent with fish catches in this Onslow Bay area from Cape Lookout down to Cape Fear there.
And so 15 miles out of Beaufort Inlet has put me in how many feet of water?
You're looking roughly 12 fathoms. So you're looking 60, 70 feet of water. I might be looking for a good consistent sea bass fish. I'm going to look at about 80 to 90 feet of water at maybe the outer edge of that. But I'll tell you that a lot of keeper fish will be caught around that 15 mark, and that's a good place to start looking for a consistent, healthier than a 14, 15-inch fish.
And then same question about water depth for triggers and beeliners.
It really depends on where the Gulf Stream is at that moment. I'm saying kind of around mid-60s, depending on how far I've run. That's at least where I'd like it to be. On up into the 70s would be ideal if you get that kind of warm push of water, if it's still around.
So you're talking more water temperature for those fish and not water depth? I'm sorry if I'm getting mixed up.
Oh, no, you're fine. For me, it's a lot of that also kind of deals with depth too. I think you're really looking at, around, and I'm sorry, I kind of operate more in fathoms and feet, so I'm kind of doing the math. I'd say about 140 feet would be kind of where I'm starting to look for the 1 to 2 size beeliner. They're grouped in, I'll regress and digress here real quick. 1 to 2 size would be your smaller keeper size beeliners, what we call them commercially. That's how they're categorized. And then the bigger ones would be the 2 to 4s. The 2 to 4 fish live in that, 40, 60 fathom water more often. So you're looking 200 foot plus. Whereas now, the 1 to 2 size, you can find them as close as 18 miles right now or 20 miles. But when we're really going to start looking for them in January, they'll probably be right there in that 140 foot, 110 to 140 foot of water.
Okay. Now I'm oriented, man. I think I have my head wrapped around it. I appreciate your patience. So
no
as
worries.
far as this podcast goes, let's go with the closer fish first. So sea bass is the primary target, the 15 miles or the 70, maybe even 80 feet of water. And if that's my goal, and I follow about, popular spots. I actually love that insight about, man, they're not being pressured. So they might be popular other times of the year, but they're not popular in the wintertime because there's such little pressure. So what is it that you're looking for? Are you looking for live bottom? Are you looking for structure? Are you looking for ledges? Like, what is the sea bass recipe for you?
For me, I keep it simple. I'm looking for just marking the fish, which if you're in a good cloud, what it looks like on your sonar of sea bass, you'll see a large mark of relatively equal size squiggles, which are the fish, coming up off the bottom. And that's something that I'll be looking for as I'm running. If you've got a good chirp sonar system in your boat, you can see these quickly, hit a mark on your GPS, come back around. If it's consistent with a larger fish mark, drop a bait down on it. If it's something small, then not. But this time of year, if you're running out that way, it's going to be consistent with what you're going to see is going to be sea bass as far as those big clouds being. And that near shore, up to 18, 20 miles offshore.
And you see what you're like. I'm guessing you're anchoring up.
It really depends this time of year. I'm young, but I still don't like throwing my back out, yanking the anchor in and out of the boat. So if I can get away drift fishing for them, I will, because I can catch them just as easily on the drift as I can anchored. I think only reason I'd really anchor is if I found a good class of fish in a very specific area and I felt the need to hover right there because they only bit consistently right there, and that could be due to currents. It could be due to just the nature of that spot itself. If it's a certain kind of ledge or something and they're enjoying, being honed in on a one ideal area, then I will, lay the anchor down for that. But ideally, I'd like to be able to drift fish for them, because hauling the anchor out is not fun on a spring day or a summer day. But when it's wintertime, the water's cold. I already broke ice off to just get out there that day. And now I got to pull the anchor out, which is in 50 some odd degree water, and it might be ambient air temperature of 40. It's just not a fun addition to the recipe of the day.
That is a fair answer. So we're going to try to get them on the drift, and I'm on your boat, and we found a cloud, and you have confidence. What are you putting in my hand?
I traditionally fish with meat, so I'm gonna go with like a standard chicken rig. I like having the weight at the bottom, so that you see these traditional Carolina rig with a weight and then the hook below it. I want the weight at the very bottom. And the reason being is I'll be able to feel the bite much better than having the weight then the hook with that kind of rig. And I like doing 2 hooks on it, because usually if I find one of these fish at this time of year, there's going to be a bunch of them. So I want to have the opportunity to at least catch 2, or at least if I hand it to you, Gary, I know you're going to feed one. So I want you to be able to have another hook there to catch the one you just fed.
That's fair. That is very fair. And I own that. I resemble that remark. I own that remark. Man, so on your standard chicken rig, how far is the first hook up from the weight, and then how far is the second hook from the first hook? Are we covering a fair amount of water column or pretty tight?
I'd say, when I'm really quickly making rigs, I'll do an arm length for me, which is 6 feet and change. And I'll, if I'm doing it real quick, if I say, oh, I don't have any rigs made and I'm on fish right now, it's as easy as pulling an arm length of 80-pound mono, doing a loop at the top, and 2 dropper loops about, 8-10 inches off, and having my weight just a loop at the end there to loop through the lead. So the whole rig itself would probably be about, 2.5, 3 feet. And that usually does okay if they're centralized on the bottom. And even if not, they'll usually swim down there and eat it.
And then people love specifics, man. Do you have a certain hook you like to use?
I like using like a 5/0 or 6/0 circle hook. That usually does me pretty well. I get a lot of sea bass grouper fishing as bycatch with a 10/0 circle hook. It's not as easy to catch a grouper on a 10/0 that it is a 5/0, but it can be done. So in the name of the game of it being January and I'm not trying to catch a gag, I'd opt for a 5 or 6.
And then what's your favorite bait that time of year?
Usually I'll buy a flat of squid wing. And it's really nice because it comes in these nice, pretty uniform chunks about that big. And you can really just go with it. And I'm a king of keeping it simple. I'd say just, a piece about the tip of your thumb, something like that on the rig. And that usually can get them going. If not, if you transition to something more bloody like an albacore chunk or a shad, or, you're probably cleaning out your bait freezer at the same time. So, you got maybe ballyhoo or something else old in there. It'll work. But I'm deterring the thought of there being dogfish or sharks around to get them enticed into biting. So if I can get away fishing with squid and having success, I'll keep it that way.
So the squid, nothing's foolproof, but the squid is pretty effective at keeping the dogfish off. And it's usually when you go to some other kind of cut bait that bite picks up.
Yeah, for the most part, that seems pretty consistent with what I've seen on my end. Now, I've caught plenty of them on the squid, too. If they're hungry, they'll eat, pretty much anything. But that is something that I definitely would recommend if you've got trouble with sharks. Probably just try to cut away from something that's so bloody or has so much scent to it. Now, I'll also touch on the fact of fishing with a jig for these sea bass. That is a preferred method for a lot of anglers. A lot of anglers that come from up north that, they're used to the cold weather. They're used to catching bigger sea bass than we are, and they catch togs and some other good fish up there on the bottom. They really do enjoy that, fast, light jig, small, high-speed jigging for these fish, and that keeps a lot of sharks off too because you're not introducing bait into the water.
And so are you doing much of that fishing, or you usually just do that to accommodate someone that requests? Yeah,
I cater to it. But as far as me going out there commercially and doing it, I'm going to be fishing with meat. It's what puts meat on the deck, and it wears you out too. It's a good workout. But when it's cold, it's a good thing to do. You know, it gets the blood flowing, gets a good pull, and it's something to always freshen up on is high speed jigging.
So this next question, I'm going to talk a little bit to set it up. So when I go bottom fishing, I never miss a bite, but I'm sure you have some clients that do miss a bite. So as far as sea bass fishing goes, you know, if you have someone pretty new to it, you know, is there any advice you give to them about when to reel, about not pulling up the rod? Like, what is the advice to someone who's new to bottom fishing and is just having a little trouble getting a fish on the hook?
I'd say that if they chose January to go out to catch sea bass and they couldn't hook one, that they probably should pick another hobby. But that being said, if they're having an issue with it, I think a lot of it comes down to if you're circle hook fishing and not used to it, it's understanding that you're not setting the hook, is that the hook is doing its work itself. You're just turning the handle. So as soon as you feel it bite, especially with sea bass, it seems like you turn it, they're there or they're not. So when I've got clients that are frustrated, they're usually just not listening. That's usually why women are much better first-time clients than men are, because they know how to listen really well. And you know, that's just something that with time, especially with circle hooks, a lot of people are so used to the J-hook method of just going bill dance with it, you know, rod tip to the, you know, T-top. And that's just not how these things work.
Man, so this is where I'm going to say, any last thoughts on sea bass fishing? And then we're going to head off and talk triggers and beeliners.
Not much. I will say, you know, you get a lot more of these, I think they call them, you know, humpbacks and fullbacks, or like the bigger sea bass, and they got that knob in the head of them. And it just, as far as a good eating fish on the bottom, those ones that are real thick like that are just such a good eating fish. So it is always worth it to go out there and target these species during this time, because, like I said, they're pretty plentiful. Recreational bag of 7 per person. You know, you get a few people on the boat, you can come home with a pretty good haul and not have to go very far or invest in a lot of different rigs to have a successful day.
I share your opinion that sea bass are delicious, absolutely delicious. So we are on the same page there. But now take me further off the beach, man. Talk to me about triggerfish and beeliner options. And then I guess we'll start with the same question, man. What are you looking for that you say, all right, this is my spot, let's try dropping here?
For me, it's I'm gonna go to the deeper end of where I usually fish for them, just because I know that they're probably gonna be pushing that direction, based on the water temps and whatnot. Sometimes it's a surprise, sometimes it could be the other way, but for the most part, that's where I'm gonna be. And a little interesting fact here I'll share about the beeliners is the 1 to 2 size. They're actually going to fatten up in the wintertime, and they're going to put about, you know, a 1 pound fish will be about 0.3 of a pound heavier, the same fish, and it's going to put the weight on around the tail. And you'll see it if you fish a lot. And that's just something that they do in the wintertime. They're feeding up, they're fattening up, and they're just going to try to stick it out. So that, for us commercially, that's something that we take into regard, because now all of a sudden I'm doing 33% better on every fish, or whatever the math adds up to right there. Fishing for these fish, now that grouper are closed, you know, it gives me an incentive to go beeliner fish. Rigs and targeting these fish, when I'm looking for them, I'm going to go with a lot smaller of a circle hook. I'm going to use pretty much the same bait. I'm going to go with the squid again if they bite it. Sometimes a little bloodier, it gets them chewing faster, and then I kind of transition off of it. That's another thing I didn't mention with the sea bass is if they're not biting for some odd reason and you can get them on something bloody, see if you can switch them back real quick to the squid and keep your bottom at bay without making it like a chum slick down there. And so now that, you know, we're in that deeper water column looking for these fish, you know, there's going to be other predators and other fish out there too, but it seems like the dogfish centralize around that more near shore bottom than when we're getting out deeper now. Now we're in 110, 140 feet looking for beeliners or maybe up to 200 feet, triggers and beeliners.
And is it the same with the sea bass? Like you need to see a cloud on the screen before you say, this is our spot, let's try this?
Traditionally, yeah, that's going to be what I'm looking for, because if I'm going to go out there and at this time of the year, I'm mostly just going to be commercial fishing. First of all, I'm not going to be out there. There aren't a whole lot of guys that call me and say, "Hey, man, we're down here for the weekend. We really want to go catch a beeliner, like some kind of ad." That's a conversation I've never had, and I don't plan to, but that's all right. So if we can go and find them that thick, I know I can have a productive day. And any minute when you're commercial fishing and you're not finding good fish, you're losing time and you're losing money. So it's all about finding the best fish for that day. And so, yeah, I'm going to look for these marks, and to describe them on your sonar, it seems like the triggerfish on my machine have a little bit more curvature, just like the curvature of the fish. That's how your sonar is going to mark them. And your beeliners are going to be a lot more of a cloud formation. They're going to be less put together or less defined as a sea bass, and they're going to be, like I said, a more of a cloud formation, especially the 1 to 2s. If you get into that deeper water, say that 240 feet ish, and you're going for those 2 to 4 size beeliners, those bigger ones, the marks are going to be a little bit more larger, and that's just going to be more consistent with that water column of fish.
And are you seeing them on the bottom like sea bass, or you find them up the water column a little bit more?
I would say that for the most part, you're going to find them on the bottom until you start fishing for them. I've had it before where I've had the triggerfish anchored on them. They were biting really good in this time, mid-January. And I've had them come all the way to the bottom of the boat, just fishing them up the water column. And you can see, you get a couple on at a time, you're reeling them up. And then you can even see on your machine, if you pull one off, you can see him swim back to the bottom. And then he kind of meets his friends, and they start working their way up. And, I mean, I've got friends, and I've got video to prove, they can get right below the boat to where you're pitch baiting them. They're right there. And the same phenomenon even happens more so, it seems like, with the beeliners. If they're really hungry, you can get them up to the top if you've introduced enough squid chunks and stuff to where they're saying, "Oh, we're feeding from up there. That's where it's coming from." They're going to work their way up there.
Man, again, my crowd likes specifics, and if you said it, I didn't pick up on it. But when you say smaller hooks, you got a number for me on that?
I do. Triggerfish, I want to go with a 1/0 circle, and the beeliners, I'm gonna go with a 2/0, and that's pretty consistent with what everybody likes to use as a size 1 and a size 2 for the trigger and the beeliner. I've caught triggers on the 2 and I've caught beeliners on the 1, and you will find plenty of spots where they're mixed in together, and that's pretty consistent with how they are as a fish. Seems like the ones that are really feeding hard, seems like it's more predominantly one than the other.
And same 2-hook chicken rig, just dropping 2 hooks down?
Yeah. I think that's consistent, especially if you're not used to doing a bunch. If you put 4 hooks on there, you just fed 3 and caught 1 instead of feeding 2 and catch 1, and the more you do that, the quicker they, I say this all the time, every time you drop, they get smarter, and it's true. So you just got to be thinking about that. I say, okay, if I'm dropping, I want to fill the boat up, but I'm dropping 4 hooks and they're all coming up robbed and I didn't catch fish. Those 4 fish just got smarter. So, being consistent with it, I like just doing the 2-hook rig. It's easy for me to make, and usually, unless someone's really experienced with it, they're not going to be able to catch that 3 or 4 at a time. I can speak to that though about, if you are getting to that point where you're catching 2 at a time, there is a good technique of, hooking the first fish and almost giving it a pause, and you can actually feel the second fish bite and hook on, and then you got both of them and you're working them both up at the same time. And that takes, a little bit of experience. You got to have the right, idea of how your fish are feeding at that time. You get, a lot of these fish, especially with the triggers and the beeliners, they will get to the point where they're getting so smart that they're eating it on the way down. So you even got to be aware of that. And if you're fishing by hand, there's no way to know it if you're with a spinning reel and the bail's just open. If you're fishing conventionally and you're holding it, sometimes you can feel it in your thumb, like the pop, 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 and you can go ahead and flip the switch and start turning the handle, and they're there. So it's one of those things to be super aware of as they get smarter, as they get hungry and create this feeding frenzy. It's something to keep in the back of your head.
And so if I'm on your boat and we're trigger beeliner fishing, were you saying like you don't even start with squid? You like go right to the cut bait and try to generate activity and then transition, or do you drop some squid just to see?
I'll usually start with squid. I'll usually start with the squid. But if for some reason they don't want to bite that, dropping just like cutting tail off a shad, just like something like that, and just introducing a little oil, a little bit of smell to the water column, and seeing what that does. Just today, I was beeliner fishing, and it was like as soon as you pulled up, they didn't want to bite, and so I did that. I just put 2 pieces of tail down, and it was like as soon as they hit the bottom, it was like bump bump, came up, brought them up, dehooked them, and then I went right back with squid, and they bit that. So it's something that I've seen consistency in. It's not something that I think needs to happen all too often. It seems like, especially this January, February timeframe, they're just going to be hungry. There's not going to be a lot of food and resources around. These fish have fattened up and trying to stick it out. And sometimes, occasionally they can be stubborn and not eat, but for the most part, they're seeing a meal in a time when they're not used to seeing one.
This time of year, and maybe you don't even do this in the warmer months, man, are you putting out a light line? Is there anything else out there that is swimming around, or are you really just focused on, and I'm saying if you were to take out a client, not necessarily a commercial trip.
Yeah. So, charter fishing, I do light line a little bit with just putting a live Tom Tate or something on the top. My favorite thing is actually, I got it right here. This is going on the boat with me tomorrow. I like having a 2-ounce white bucktail, and you can see all the paint missing on him. That's because just this October and November month that we've had, and even into January and these other times, you can pitch bait dolphin, you can pitch bait lost wahoo even. I mean, these fish, they don't have a set schedule when they come and go. They can get lost, and if you're introducing a squid trail like that, especially these beeliner and trigger fishing, you will find some lost creatures, and they'll come up, they'll be hungry, and a 2-ounce white bucktail with just a squid strip or anything will catch a ton of fish, and it's a lot of fun.
Okay, I'm gonna finish with getting you to talk about safety, but before I transition to safety, any last thoughts on trigger and beeliner fishing, or anything that you thought of? Maybe I mentioned this about sea bass. I guess your final thoughts on bottom fishing before we go to safety.
Just, it's a tough time to be out on the water, but it can be rewarding. And when I'm out there doing it like this, I'd probably rather be sea bass fishing if I was just going to go for myself if this time of year. If I'm going to sell it, or if people really want to go and do the trigger and beeliner stuff, I'll go and do that instead. But for me personally, this time of year, I'm going to go sea bass fishing.
Right on. Well, what about safety, man? Someone's watching this podcast or listening to this podcast and thinking, man, I need a fix in January or February. I'm going to try this out. From your experience, man, what is it necessary to consider before making the trip, even, 12, 15, 17 miles out?
So if we can, just think about the water that we're fishing in, the temperature. If you bring a life jacket on board a boat, even if you got an EPIRB in your hand, in 70-degree water, you're pretty well off right there, with a PLB on your person if you're fishing alone, if you go overboard. And 55-degree water and lower, you're really risking the odds of not making it. And that's something you can't take lightly. This is a really tough time to be on the water. I'd highly recommend, if you are planning on doing any fishing this time of year, to have a life raft on board. It's required for us commercial snapper grouper boats to have one. And I think it should be a requirement for a lot of the charter boats. I understand why it's not. It's very expensive, and it's not easy to store, especially in a center console like what I've got. And it's, it's a pain because you got to repack them every 2 years, or every year after you buy it, and then every year after that. So it is incredibly important. I know it's expensive, but that is something that I can't stress safety enough. Being a sea tow captain as well here, we see a lot of boats break down in the wintertime because people aren't taking care of their things, or, they are taking care of it, but they hadn't run it in a little while, and they finally saw a little window to get out and fish. Well, it's cold now, and they flushed the motor, and they didn't get all the water out of it, and it cracked a very substantial part of their engine that they didn't realize until they're out the inlet and the tide was going out. Preparing and thinking about those obstacles, I'll say, are integral to making sure you can make it back to the light, to the dock with your life and everything intact. So, having a paid, towing service, whether it be Towboat US or Sea Tow, and doubling up on your safety. I mean, I've got a picture that I sent that has me. I'm in blaze orange hat and gloves, and I've got a yellow vest on, and I've got a PLB on myself with a engine stop switch on the PLB, and I got an ACR. I guess that's what that locator beacon is, all on my life vest. That's an inflatable type. And so that's what I'd wear when I'm out there fishing by myself. And I might not even be out of sight of land, but that's just what you've got to do.
I got it, man. I mean, I'm with you that it is unforgiving there in the wintertime. And just for the record, you are recommending that someone get a towboat membership. Is that what I just heard?
If that's all that they can afford, then they should go for it.
Byron, last question, man, is, you're busy year round. And while you might be a little bit more focused on commercial fishing here in these winter months, I know that you have a vibrant charter business that you've been growing and working on. So how about the quick highlight reel? When the winter months warm up and grouper comes back in the season, I guess you're targeting grouper, from May through the end of the year, but what else are you doing? What do you want the people to know who might be thinking, man, this is a dude I'd like to fish with?
Well, I could say starting in mid-March, we start having a great wahoo run here all the way till May. I enjoy people, coming and enjoying that. But really, I think my biggest bread and butter of what I can offer is that May through August time of either shallow water gag fishing or doing the deeper water complex with electric reels, going for tile fish, a snowy grouper, these big beeliners, big red porgies. It's a great variety. We get toro fish, all sorts of really cool things out there in the deep, and it's just a really cool opportunity to do. And that's definitely what I enjoy doing the most, and having people come and do with me is just, the thing about bottom fishing is you never know what you're going to pull up, and it's always exciting getting somebody's first fish or landing the big one.
What about the fall, man? What gets you excited about fall fishing?
Traditionally, fall is another great wahoo time. The gag grouper bite is my bread and butter from, August through December if the water's right. And it can be awesome. Another nice thing about the fall is we usually, end of summer to fall, is we get, our red snapper season. I'll probably be booked up for the next 5 years for that one weekend we usually get. But that's also another thing to look forward to late summer and early fall. But just like we had talked about here today, this sea bass, beeliner and trigger fishing is all something that are just in the mix with grouper fishing. And like we said, when you came fishing with me, we're grouper fishing, but everything else is bycatch. But it doesn't hurt if the bycatch is edible and it's good, and it's something I also enjoy catching.
I agree, man. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I look forward to getting back out on your boat and feeding some more fish and making some more fish smarter, and then hopefully hooking a couple of the dumb ones.
Absolutely. Always happy to do that.
Byron, thank you for your time, man. This has been a great podcast. It's been a great chat, man. I mean, bottom fishing has a special place in my heart, and I've thoroughly enjoyed what you shared with us, man.
Me too, Gary. I just appreciate everything the Fisherman's Post done, and look forward to getting back out there as well.
All right, man. Have a good night.
You too.
Take care, Byron. Billy.
Gary.
Billy's best takeaway. Hey, wake up, Billy. It's time for your best takeaway.
I got my notebook. And I quote, "If you can't hook a sea bass in January, you need a new hobby."
I agree.
Need a new hobby, man. I might need a new hobby. So if you're fishing for sea bass in January and you can't hook them, there you go. Your wife was right. You need to get rid of all this fishing shit and move on.
Go south and go golfing.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then also another takeaway, a real one. I thought it was interesting with the triggerfish. Like, hook up on one, wait a second, give it a little time, and then you might get two. So that's not my name is Billy Thorpe, and I'm a lot like Bill Dance, man. I will just rip the lips off and let's get this thing to the boat. But patience is not my game. So that's a good couple tips there.
It is, man. I mean, it is. And again, bottom fishing has a special place in my heart, man. Long time been a fan, and, got to fish with Byron, and, love his approach to the game, to that pastime. And yeah, man, I thought that was a good podcast, man. I think a lot of people are itching, to catch some fish in January and February. And though groupers closed, there's still reason to go out there, man. It's still, as he said, challenging but rewarding. I'm with him 100%.
Yep, and you better listen to him. He's got the Cito shirt on. Safety first, people. Don't get out there and do something dumb.
Look at that guy, man. He's new, but, man, that was a strategically placed Cito logo as well as the Onslow Bay logo. Man, he's playing the game.
Yeah.
I wonder how much he got paid for that, man. Do we get a cut?
Yeah, we do. I'm gonna send Scott an invoice. You better believe it.
All right. Billy, this has been great, man.
Yeah, man, it's been fun. Been a ton of fun. Thank you again to Marine Warehouse Center, Bland Landscaping Co., and RA Hitch for making it all possible. You guys are great, and we'll see you in the next episode, Gary.
Enjoyed it.